Hello and welcome to the FilmSetGeek.com podcast, interviews of experts across all disciplines of film and TV production, sponsored by Axis Grip Hungary, professional aerial filmography and stabilised rig and grip services. I'm Steve Collison and my guest today is production designer Michael Fleischer. Michael has been working as a film, TV and theatre production designer and art director for over 30 years, with credits including The Borgias, Waking the Dead, Hotel Babylon, X-Company, and the BAFTA-nominated Sky Television production The Last Dragonslayer. Michael has been based in Canada, the UK and Hungary and has worked all across Europe and around the world. And we're delighted to have him drop by today to talk to us. Welcome, Michael. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Steve.
So please could you describe the role of the production designer in your own words?
Basically, the production designer is in charge of everything visual that you see on the screen that isn't on an actor's back. That's the costume designer's responsibility. So everything that you see on the screen is part of the production design remit. Mm-hmm. That being scenery, any locations, cars, props, action vehicles, weapons, and a whole list of other things that go into making the production design.
Got it. Sounds like a massive and a very expansive role, and perhaps could you clarify, and this is perhaps just for my benefit, what would be the difference between the production designer and the art director?
Basically, the production designer is the head of the department.
Got it.
The art director is also a head of the department. Technically, they're head of the art department, and the production designer is in charge of the design department. Yeah. But there are names that have changed over the 100 years or so that we have film. Yeah. In the old days of Hollywood, the head of the department used to be called the art director because they were directing the art.
Got it.
But over years, that title has changed. Now we have the head of department called the production designer, who works very closely with their supervising art director to run the department, who actually gets the crew together to support the production designer in their remit to design.
Got it. Fantastic. So then I'd be keen to talk a little bit about your career first, then get into some of the specifics of your role as a production designer. So how did you get into production designing?
That's always a very good question, to which for many years I didn't even have an answer. So the comedy answer is I failed my audition as a Radio City Music Hall Rockette.
Okay.
And that led me to production designing. But no, that, of course, is the glib answer to how I became a production designer. When I started in the industry all those years ago, it sounds ominous right now, but there weren't as many specialist film schools. There weren't as many specialist film and television schools as they have now.
And this is in the 80s, early 80s?
This is in the late 80s. I'm not that old,
Sorry.
Steve.
Yeah, okay. Late 80s, yeah.
In the late 80s, when I graduated from high school, I applied to what was called then the Ryerson Polytechnical Institute in Toronto. Yeah. I originally didn't get in, but I also applied to York University in Toronto for a fine arts course.
Okay.
As I wasn't quite sure what direction my life would be taking. I knew I was interested in the arts and design.
Got it.
But I wasn't quite sure how I went about getting to where I wanted to get.
Yes.
So I chose the York University. In the end, I ended up getting into both places. Yeah. But I chose York University, and my first year studied just fine arts, which I think in Europe you call a foundation course.
Okay.
But in that year, I studied acting, stage management, costume design, set design. Also, there was visual art, painting, the early stages of graphic design. So it was a lot of different disciplines that I studied in the first year. Yeah. And that helped me kind of decide which direction I wanted to go with my education.
Right. So then, yes, and how did that down selecting
happen? After the first year, having done all of those, I knew there were certain things I definitely did not want to do. Yeah. And after that first year, I sort of started to excel in costume design. In fact, set design came afterwards. I was a big fan of the costume designers of the late 60s and 70s, someone called Theone Aldridge, who designed many, many famous Broadway plays. In that time, I was very theatre oriented. Film didn't even come into it. We didn't know how to study that or how to go in that direction or even how to pursue a career in film and television. But I was quite happy studying theatre. I mean, the 80s was sort of one of the golden eras of theatre, with a lot of big shows. Funny enough, one which I saw for the first time in 30 odd years, Les Miserables, was opening. Phantom of the Opera, Andrew Lloyd Webber.
Yeah, the Lloyd Webber boom. And
Cameron Mackintosh was really big. And every year there was a great big show coming out of London. And I'm just jumping back a little bit, just to see, just to explain where my excitement in theatre was really nurtured. We went on a school trip to London at the last year of high school, and we saw all sorts of great theatre, and I knew kind of that's what I wanted to do, but I didn't really have any idea how to explore getting into the theatre. So, I'm just cut forward is where I kind of got into those two schools and decided to go to York University to study fine arts and then specialise in theatre in the second year. The second year was much more focused on theatre design. We studied more of the classics, of Greek classics, Roman, medieval plays, and we got back into Shakespeare. And that was really the first time I kind of enjoyed or understood the genius behind Shakespeare, and then later Jacobean tragedies and what came of that, and 17th century Restoration comedies. And really we spent a lot of time studying the history of theatre and playwriting.
And this encompassed them using costumes in a particular way historically as well. How that was manifest.
Yes, and the first year, second year of university, we had to do a recreation of a Greek tragedy. And how they would have staged it, and we actually rewrote. I can't remember which one. Sophocles, Pericles, one of the Clees. And we John rewrote Cleese. It. Of course, the students who were very adept at writing or wanted to pursue writing rewrote the play to be I think it was a 20-minute or a 40-minute. I can't remember. It seemed awful long. Excerpt from the play. We then had to stage it, make the masks, make the scenery, and you kind of got taught not only your own discipline but everybody else's discipline, and which I think actually was a really important lesson. Too many people now, and I'm sounding a bit soapboxy, learn about their own division, about their own job, but that really forced us to learn about other people's jobs, which in turn taught us to have respect for other people's jobs as well. And now to this day, when somebody comes on, when I work with a DOP or costume designer, I kind of understand where they're coming from and see what they're looking at. And there's a lot of things I learned from one of the plays I'd seen was a anthology by somebody named Will Rogers. It was a Tommy Tune play, and it was called Will Rogers' Follies. And in it, he has a wonderful line that says, "Never judge a man when you're looking at him. You want to stand behind him and take a look at what he's looking at, and then you get a better idea where he's coming from." And I kind of use that in my design. You've really got to get out of that one track blinders mentality when you're designing something, and you need to see where your audience is looking at it from, where all ages are looking at it from, where the 18-year-old teenager is looking at it from, where's the 80-year-old grandmother looking at it from. And you need to keep your mind open, and that helps your design be much freer.
So then you finished studies at York. Then what happened next?
Very swiftly, my I think it was set design professor, or told me that I was quite ready. That's it. I'm ready for the industry now.
Okay. Yeah.
Of course, the industry wasn't quite ready for me, and that wasn't the way it happened. And I got told if I want to take this really seriously, I must pursue some kind of postgraduate education.
All right.
And they suggested I go to London to apply to go to the Central St. Martin's College of Art and Design.
All right.
Which I managed to get into.
Wow, okay.
And I thought, wow, okay, great.
Yeah.
I then packed the bags and went to London, did my schooling at Central St. Martin's College of Art and Design, which, having learnt what an exciting place London was, and how free it was, and how accessible it was to see things. I mean, in that time when I was at Central, we were really encouraged to go to galleries and to go to museums.
Yeah.
And of course, the wonderful thing about London is all of this is free.
Okay.
Which is very helpful
As
to
a
poor
student
student.
or in general?
No, in general.
Okay,
you can
right.
get into
a lot of,
Well, there are special exhibitions that you must pay for.
Yeah, of course, yes.
But the main collections at the Victoria Albert Museum, at the museum, the British Museum,
Tate Modern,
the Tate Modern, they're all free.
Yeah. Yeah.
So really, as a young man, I got to leave Central St. Martin's, and if I had a few hours free in an afternoon, I'd just walk into the National Gallery.
Incredible.
And I thought that in itself was a wonderful education.
I bet.
Having grown up in Montreal, Canada, till I was 10, and then the family moved to Toronto. As a 20-something-year-old postgraduate student in London, to have all of this art accessible to you was really an education in itself.
Yeah.
And of course, there's all that wonderful architecture. There's all that wonderful history behind a city like London, that the city itself was its education.
Yeah. And so how many years at St. Martin's? Central St. Martin's College?
I was there for 2 years.
Yeah.
I finished that.
Yeah.
And then I thought, okay, great, wonderful. I'm ready to go out. I spent many years as an assistant to a designer in the theatre.
Right.
And we'd done many things at the Royal National Theatre, at the Royal Shakespeare Company, out in Stratford.
Right, yeah.
And it was, again, an education in itself. I started very basically gluing sequins on shoes, doing various jobs, drafting, drawing, doing anything that the designer asked me to do.
Yes.
So basically I started right at, I don't want to say at the bottom, but started sharpening pencils,
hands-on.
Basically.
Yeah,
it was very hands-on.
So then how did it develop from there?
Well, basically, after I'd spent many years in the theatre as a freelance assistant, having never really held a full-time job, I just felt there wasn't enough opportunities in the theatre at that time. We'd gone from the 80s and early 90s, which saw a boom, and there just really wasn't enough opportunities for someone who was just dying to work.
Yeah.
So I did a lot of research into how I would develop my craft, and I then found the National Film and Television School.
Right.
And I duly applied for that. I just felt, something, it felt a natural step to take my craft in that direction.
Yeah.
And I applied for that and got in.
Right.
And spent 3 years at the film school.
Yeah.
Which, one of the things I was really, really keen about that educational facility was it was very hands-on.
Yeah.
And it taught you practical filmmaking.
Yeah.
You worked with your other students who were students of cinematography and editing and sound, And you made films. You made your first year film, you made your second year film, and then you made your graduation film.
Yeah.
And you were always working with a different team. You were working with fiction writers, documentary filmmakers even.
Yeah.
And it was very much a hands-on kind of school. And it was also somewhere where you got to meet an awful lot of people as well, some of whom I still keep in contact with today, and some of which I have had the pleasure to work with over the years.
Yeah, and that was specifically, what was the specific discipline that you were enrolled in at the NFT?
It was production design and art direction.
So then the NFT then was the real springboard for the film work then?
Yes, it was.
Yeah,
yeah it was.
Yeah.
From there, I met a lot of people, and my career took a sort of natural progression of, again, I didn't quite start where I did because I was a good decade earlier than I was. I didn't do the pencil sharpening.
Yeah, yes.
When I started that, I'd gotten sharp pencils by that point, so I didn't need to do that one again, thankfully. But I started as an assistant art director.
Yeah.
I was given a job by the late Chris Townsend, and I started as assistant art director. And the second job I got after that, I believe I was already art directing.
Incredible, yeah, yeah.
And then I moved up from art director to supervising art director, to where I am right now as head of the department of production designer. But that did not happen overnight. It didn't go as quickly as I'm saying it right now.
Course. Yes,
I graduated again. For someone who did not like high school and did not like any kind of formal education.
Yeah.
I've done 7 years, I keep saying, of postgraduate schooling.
Yes.
So I learned how to like school, and I do actually. I enjoy the education of it, my postgraduate education of it.
Yeah.
And I recommend it for anybody who wants to go into the industry, because it does teach you not only your own craft, but like I said before, it teaches you other people's crafts as well, which only makes your own better.
Yeah, yeah. So then you graduated. This would have been late 90s, graduating from the NFT.
2000.
2000. So then, what were some of the first film and TV projects that you started on as you came out of the National Film and Television School?
Right out of film school, there was again with another rather large portfolio, which in my first interview I got told had too much work in it, in fact. And it was true. It was a great lesson in portfolio management. And I try to pass that on now when I teach at the various establishments, that keep your portfolio trim. Okay. Because you can repeat yourself. But anyways, having then criticized that my portfolio was too large, the wonderful, who I mentioned earlier, Chris Townsend, gave me a job on the first series of Waking the Dead for BBC Prime Time, and
terrific.
That was it. That was the big time.
Yeah.
Or so I thought.
That's a big ticket. Big ticket.
Well, I just thought, okay, well, this is my first real job in the film industry.
Yeah.
And it was a great learning curve. I'd had the longest job I'd ever had since graduating university. Yeah. The first time around. Yeah. It was a long job. I think it was 8 1-hours or 10 1-hours. I can't remember, but it was a long job, and I learned an awful lot from Chris about designing. Yeah. And then I found out, in fact, on that job, in retrospect, that my education was just starting again. Right. Yep. The new education of learning while you work was starting then, and I learned an awful lot and met some of the people I still work with to this day on Waking the Dead.
Now that was it's a contemporary program.
It was a contemporary program with Susan Johnson and Trevor Eve. Yeah. And it was based on finding closed cases.
Yeah, right.
And it was when forensics first started coming back
Yeah.
into our lives.
Yeah.
This was many years before the CSI
Yes. Yeah.
put in whatever town you want to call it.
Yeah. Yes.
But it was a very interesting concept, and it ran for many years
Yeah. Yeah.
after that.
Yeah.
But it was my first big job.
Yeah.
And through that job, I then worked with Chris again on another job called Rehab, which the interesting thing about that film was we'd filmed the entire thing in an old mansion house in Hatfield.
Yes.
And what I loved about it, it was a real lesson in location designing, because we'd adapted a mansion house. The whole piece took place in a rehabilitation center.
Yeah.
And we'd adapted this mansion to be it.
Yeah.
And funny enough, it worked, and it helped to tell the story, because much of the story was about how everybody was put in, about how everybody was locked in, how everybody was closed in.
Yes.
And to actually have the actors be locked in, closed in,
Yeah.
into this space, which we shot in script order.
Okay. Yeah.
And because we were so much locked to that one location, we could do it. The schedule was written in script order, and it helped wonderfully in telling that story. And that's, probably a theme I've been repeating too much, is how the design helps tell the story. And in this case, the location helped the actors get the mood of the story.
Yeah.
And it made it, terrible word, but real.
Yeah.
A lot more believable.
Yes. So then you worked on Waking the Dead, Rehab. You were now based in the UK, and from your perspective, this was a permanent thing. You've moved away from North America. This is where your career was and would continue to be.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
I'd been in the UK for 15 years.
Yeah.
I started to build up my circle of contacts that was growing and growing.
Yep.
After I'd finished Rehab, I'd then went into what I call my early historical drama period. I did something called Colosseum for the BBC, and then that led on to doing the BAFTA award-winning Dunkirk.
Incredible, the TV series, yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
and the reason I'm extremely proud of that work is we'd done it all on the actual northern shores of France. And a lot of the places were near the actual places that it happened.
Yes, yes.
So that was, not only was it interesting, it was kind of humbling to be revisiting these places that were used. Well, not used, revisiting the real Dunkirk. And we filmed in around that whole northern France, northern Belgian area.
Yeah. So then the further steps then that brought you, because you're now based you're located in Hungary, but you're working internationally as ever. But what led you then, what brought you around to here? What were some of the other productions you worked on and got you over to Hungary?
What happened was I'd been in Thailand filming the last Avita Zane Pet.
Yeah. This is the revisit, essentially, of Alzheimer's, which was
and it was going to be the last one, and it was a fantastic job.
Yeah,
really great, exciting. Saw places I'd never thought I'd get to see in my life.
Yeah,
and that's when I got the call from a production in Hungary.
Yep.
That they needed an art director for a film.
Yeah.
And my background is Hungarian. My parents left Budapest in 1956 after the revolution to go to Canada. And we'd grown up in a very Hungarian society. A lot of my parents' friends, in fact, all of my parents' friends were Hungarian.
Yes.
I grew up speaking Hungarian, and of course, with being born in Montreal, French as well. So there's quite a multilingual upbringing, and I still spoke quite a bit of Hungarian, and I just leaped at the opportunity
Yeah, I
to
bet.
go back to Hungary.
Yeah.
And it was kind of the beginnings of what's now a very popular place to film. In
Yeah.
that time, it really wasn't. It was still used as filming because Budapest and a lot of Hungary can be an awful lot of places. It's doubled for Moscow, Paris, Rome. It's a very, architecturally, it's a very nice European city, and plus it's had a lot of development and a lot of building through communism, so
Yeah.
there's very diverse in a lot of different architectural styles around Hungary, so it was ripe for finding as a good filming place.
So this would have been the late noughties, early teens, something like that?
Early noughties.
Early noughties, okay.
Early noughties.
Yeah.
And it was a good introduction into filming in Hungary, and I found there was a wealth of talent, of, for lack of a better term, backstage talent.
Yeah.
And I'm going back to my theatrical roots.
Yeah.
That there was a lot of very good craftsmen in Hungary, and that's what I found very exciting to work with.
Yeah.
The construction teams were very good.
Craftspeople.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What did I say?
Craftsmen. But that's all right.
Craftspeople.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. Yeah.
I use that term craftsmen.
I
It can
know,
be for
yeah, of
craftswomen
course,
as well.
Absolutely, of course.
Apologies.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. That there were an awful wealth of craftspersons in Hungary.
Yeah.
And I found that exciting to work with. I've always been someone who's very much hands-on with working with my painters, working with my sculptors, working with the team of people that I get the pleasure to work with.
Yeah.
And the joy to be working in a team environment like that where people around you are so talented, I find makes you want to make your work better. And it was an exciting opportunity, one that I was very keen to repeat. But it didn't happen immediately. I got offered to do a television series of my own. At that point, I was really keen on stepping up to be a production designer, which is not an easy decision to make. Because what essentially you're doing is you're putting yourself out on the gangplank alone. And probably having to start your career again, because all the people that you originally started to get work with as an art director, as an assistant art director, as a runner, your pool was quite big. What then happens is when you put yourself out as a production designer, that pool of people that you worked with before that help you find work aren't there anymore.
Okay. Yes. Yeah.
So, but I knew it was something I always wanted to do because, it's a very interesting thing to be given a script and to lead creatively.
And that's then because you're then as a production designer, then you're then the it's about being closer to the director, to the producers.
That's the exciting thing about it. Getting a wonderful script from a good writer, to sit down with a producer and then a director, to find out how you're going to create this film between all of you, to listen to. A collaboration with a very good director is always very exciting, and that's what I always wanted to do. The job's much easier being an art director, being one behind the designer, and the job in many ways is a lot more creative than being a designer. But as a designer, you do get to sit down with your co-collaborators and figure out the most exciting way of visualizing a script. And that's the exciting thing that I always wanted to pursue. From the very beginning, to be able to put your pencil on a piece of white paper and it's not white after, and then that's what you're going to do.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's the excitement of creation.
Yeah, yeah. So then that really then more or less in terms of your chronology, that brings you close to where we are now in the Hungarian film industry has obviously gone through something of a renaissance over the last decade or so, and you've really been a part of that. There's been some major television series that have come over here, and you've also, which you've been a part of.
Yes, I've kind of been around watching the industry sort of bubble up in the early noughties,
yeah,
and then going a little bit quiet,
yeah,
when the whole rest of the world went a little bit quiet,
yeah,
and then it started to pick up again, when the whole rest of the world started to pick up again,
yeah,
and that's really when these big television series started to come to Hungary, like the Borgias came, and other multi-episodic series started to come at the same time.
Yeah.
And the industry started to grow.
Yes.
And other people started to come into the industry, more films started to come in.
Yeah.
I'd spoken the language, which had improved by me being here.
Yeah.
And other opportunities opened up with working as a production designer, and I took them because I like to work in this environment.
Yeah. So then what I think what we'll be really keen to do now is then if we talk some of the specifics of the role, at what point do you usually get involved with the production?
Quite early on.
Yeah.
Although not as early on as it used to be.
Okay.
But after the director, I'm usually the next HOD to be brought on board.
Okay.
Usually after that, it's a DOP.
Yeah.
After that, it's an editor.
Yeah.
Usually just slightly between all of those is the costume designer.
Yeah.
But the process usually goes, the producer hires a director, and the director then gets a production designer.
So the producer's got a script, gets the director in, and then the next step is the production designer. Yeah.
First thing is to get it written.
Yes.
And written well.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah.
When I read a script now, I read it the first time through.
Yes.
Trying very hard not to break it down. And I'll explain what breakdowns are a bit later.
Yeah.
But I try just to read it and see it as someone sitting in the cinema.
Yeah.
At your local theatre, to see how they would enjoy the film. And then I try to do it in a way that, how do you tell this story in pictures only?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because a production designer shouldn't just be there, or I believe, to get myself out of trouble here, I don't think a production designer should just be there providing sets. Mm-hmm. You know, there'll be a description of where it is, a kitchen, a living room, a pier, a bridge, whatever. Yeah. It's not just providing that location or set that's in the screenplay, but it's also providing that location set that's in the screenplay that helps tell the story.
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
That is the main part of what a production designer does, because anybody, and I think even more and more people now, when they read a script, think we've got to do a kitchen. Everybody knows what a kitchen looks like. Yeah. Everybody knows what a living room looks like, but it's very different when you're making that kitchen or living room for a film.
Yes.
Because you have to remember, you're only looking at it from the direction of the camera.
Yeah. Yeah. And then, and what happens then at that initial stage when you get involved?
Well, it's what we always call the kind of cat sniffing stage.
Okay.
Because you're kind of figuring out where the other wants to go with it. You're trying to figure out, if this is the first time you're working with that director, you're trying to figure out where they're coming from, what kind of film they want to make, what's the tone they want to make. And there's tools. You start early sketches, you start early ideas, you start to bring in very early visual references for it. That's again when I'd probably do my location mood boards
Yeah.
or to do just general mood boards for certain sets.
Yes.
They're very helpful in kind of getting ideas and reactions to what colors
Yeah.
people want to use, what colors people like,
Yeah.
even, how do we narrow down or even expand how we'd like to draw the film the film.
Yes.
That's all part of the early discussions.
Yes.
Of course, when you've already worked with that director, which I have a few directors that I consistently work with,
Yeah.
that shorthand is built up
Yeah.
from working with them before.
Yes.
And that's really a hitting the ground running moment with the director that you worked with before.
Yeah.
And you don't, for lack of a better term, waste the time figuring out.
Yeah.
You already have, and you know what the director is sensitive to, and you kind of react to that.
Yeah.
And also, by that point, if you've worked with that director before, how acceptable they are to new and different, or let's flip it on its head,
Yeah.
or to use a terrible term I don't like using, let's try and figure out a new way of showing this that we haven't done before.
Yes. Yeah. So then it's is that at that stage, and it's something of an iterative process. There's conversation to begin with. Then you're coming back with the mood boards, and it's evolving, going from big to small.
It goes from big to small, back to big again.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a very fluid
Yeah.
process, which is why it's kind of hard to explain
Yes.
to people what a production designer does,
Yeah.
because it's kind of a very fluid job where you don't just come and present a design.
Yeah.
You kind of fall at the design through an awful lot of discussion and collaboration.
Yeah.
Many times I've worked with inexperienced people who've came back to me and my team when they've been quite young in the industry.
Yeah.
When I've had a set that I can't quite put my finger on, and their reaction is, well, you're the designer, why don't you just say it's going to look like this? That's not how you design a film.
Yeah.
You're designing the film with the director, and you arrive at something that either they didn't think about or you didn't think about.
Yes. Yeah.
And it's through that discussion that something very exciting happens.
Yeah.
Just designing something and presenting something is not exciting at all. It's where you come from that collaboration that is exciting.
Yeah. And then you have, and what sort of timing are we looking at then? For example, if it's a TV production, how many months in advance are you getting involved with this?
It can range. It
Yes.
depends. You can have anything. The longest I've had is 6 months.
Yeah.
Shortest I've had is 6 weeks.
Okay. Yeah.
Which is not really sufficient to design something, because you just got to get it out.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which kind of counteracts what I've just said about
Yeah.
arriving at
Yeah.
the best design possible.
Yeah. Are you heavily involved with the location scouting process?
Very much so.
Yeah.
Very early on, I start with a location manager.
Yeah.
And I give them what's called a location mood board. Having read the script and discussed with the director, I then give a location mood board to the location manager,
Yeah.
which they can either pay attention to or not. But more times than not, they end up looking at the location mood board and finding places that have that general feeling
Yeah.
of what I tried to convey in those
Yes.
mood boards. And that gives you a good leaping start into your design.
Yeah.
And also the wonderful thing about using a location, it's got a bit of air in it. It's got a bit of dust on it. It's got a bit of history to it.
Yeah.
A lot of time when you're building a set, and we've kind of by accident got into building a set versus a location. A lot of time when you're building your set, the hardest thing is at the end of it to make it look as if it's not a set.
Of course. Yeah. Yeah.
And the aging time
Okay.
to make that aged.
Yes.
Takes an awful lot of time.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. And then throughout this process, there is the collaboration you talk about and getting, and that's with the other departments, but also the budget from a budget point of view and the procurement, the production side of things as well.
Budget.
Yes.
That's the first time we mentioned.
Yes. Yeah.
It's a very important part.
Yeah.
It is a very important part because every film has a budget.
Yeah.
And though, the public is led to believe, there's endless amounts of money for that. Yeah. No project has endless amounts of money, even from the big multi-studio action pictures. They have a budget.
Yes.
To the smallest little low-budget film has some part of money that they need to make the film out of.
Yeah.
And your job is to make that film from that money, or inform how to make this film from that pot of money.
Yeah, yeah.
It's not necessarily here's the script and this is the money and we've got to make the square peg fit into the round hole.
Yeah.
It's a balancing act of saying what we can do, what would be challenging, what's achievable, what's perhaps a challenge, then that reinventing that challenge about how it becomes less challenging.
Yeah.
But it's, what I call the tennis match.
Yes.
You whack the ball over and it comes back and you have to whack it back. The idea is always to keep the ball in play.
Yeah. Yeah. And as then this evolves in the pre-production period, how do you make concrete the ideas, the notions? It sounds like the mood board is quite an early stage. How does it start to become visualized? Is it a package on the computer screen? Is it pictures on a wall? How does it start to really become a tangible thing rather than just ideas?
Basically, what happens is after that kind of figuring out how we would like to make this film, I start with very early sketches.
Got it, yeah.
And I develop those up with the team that I have.
Yes.
And it's very important that, in mentioning that, making that step up to production designer and being in charge of the visual of the film, you don't make a film on your own.
Yeah.
The team around you are instrumental in making that discovery and that path.
Yeah.
And that's when you start to have your art directors around you, your assistant art directors. I work with concept artists sometimes.
And you're choosing your team?
Yes.
Always?
Always.
I mean, as a production designer, that's...
Yes.
Yeah, got it.
Yeah, that's part of the fun.
Yeah.
I tend to... I choose my team very non-conventionally.
Yeah.
I very rarely like to get references.
Uh-huh.
Because I always feel... Whenever I did it once and I've gotten, 4 different opinions on one person. So I kind of like to look at what they've done, what their capabilities are, how they will work with other people.
Yeah.
And it's interesting putting a good team together, and sometimes you get it right, and sometimes you get it not so right.
Okay. Yeah. So
but
then,
it's trial and error, really, and we're all sensitive souls in this industry. We're all artists, for lack of a better term, and putting different people together with different people, you never know what the stew's going to bring up till you throw it all in.
Yeah. So then you're building up what sounds like sketches, concept art, photographs of actual locations. This is all being built up, and it's in a room that the director can come and walk in and out of, or is it on a computer, or how is it?
No. You're very you get put into an art department, a room near the production. Yeah. Sometimes this is a porta cabin.
Yeah. Okay.
Near. Yeah. Location or in a specific location.
Yeah.
But that's when you start to put drawings up on the wall. You start to discuss specifics of script.
Yeah.
You start to develop specifics of props.
Yes.
Location.
Yeah.
And you very carefully start to break down the entire film into the little elements that put together make a very big element.
Yes.
It's a very daunting task when you first get a script. There can be any number of sets and locations.
Yeah.
You know, it can range anything from an episodic script for an hour. You could get 40, 45. I've had some that have been 60, 65. And you have to break each one of those sets down to a little elements that go together to make that.
Yeah.
You can't do the entire thing at once. You have to break down the big monster into all the little monsters.
Yeah.
And then you can fight all the little monsters instead of the one big one that's coming to get you. After that, you get what they call in the industry a shooting schedule.
Okay.
And that, from the minute you get it, is your Bible.
Okay.
Because that's after you've broken all the aforementioned monsters down.
Yeah.
You put all those little monsters in a row.
Yeah.
And then you start to attack that way. And you start to knock them down one by one, till you get to the end of the film.
How big's your team?
Depends on the size of the script.
Yeah.
For the Last Dragonslayer, we had an art department of, I think, 8 to 10.
Yeah.
That's not including the carpenters, that's not including the painters, not including
Got
the
it.
construction team,
Okay,
prop
got it.
man.
Yeah.
You know, your team could go up to 65, 70 easily.
Yeah. Okay.
You know, on some days you can have very, very big teams.
Yeah.
I try not to have too big an art department.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'd rather less people work more than more people work less.
Yes.
Sounds kind of slave drivery, but it isn't. I like giving people more responsibility and see what comes of it.
Yes.
As opposed to just giving a little job of something to 5 different people.
Yeah. Yeah.
I just find I work better that way. Other designers might say, you know, that's a terrible way to work.
And then obviously we said that you're essentially props aside. So props is which are the items which the actors would be interacting with. Your department is responsible for absolutely everything. So where is there sort of a threshold? I guess it depends on every different production, but is there a threshold to say you're going to decide which spoons are on the kitchen table, or indeed your art director is going to decide which spoons? And those things are just not the sorts of things that need to be signed off by the director. Is there a threshold that you sort of
kind of everything
operate
needs
around?
To be
right?
Everything needs to be. Yeah. What you start to do is you start to gather people around you that will understand the way you'd like to design a film.
Yeah.
So they're going to bring you the spoons.
Got it. Yeah.
A selection of spoons that you might like.
Got it. And you're making those decisions, or then you would down select, and then you would take the final thing potentially to the director.
Yes, or the prop master will take it to the director. But I'll originally say, out of those 6 spoons, I like these 3.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
But it's a spoon. It's an example of something.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and then sourcing. So could you tell us perhaps a little bit about the sourcing? So how is it? Again, it's horses for courses. Depending what type of production is. Do you have established routes to source the set, or does it often mean that you go and source and you find out people that you know, go to shops yourself? How does the whole universe of sourcing work?
Well, the next step when you get a design commission is to appoint your set decorator.
Yeah.
And they basically are your right-hand person.
Yeah.
In putting the production together.
Yeah.
As they do an awful lot of the sourcing and finding visually how your piece will go together.
Yes.
And they have a history and connections with countless sources of props, anything it takes to make the film together.
Yeah.
It's probably the most important collaboration you make in the art department.
Yeah.
And I am adamant about supporting set decorators and prop men in helping you make the film. There's a lot of, I will get on my soapbox once now, there's an awful lot of websites now. This is the bane of the internet, but it's very good in some ways. And there's an awful lot of people on there posting questions of how to source this and how to source that and how do I find this and how do I find that. My answer is always hire yourself a very talented set decorator.
Yes.
And work with them in sourcing it.
Yeah.
It's the internet shouldn't be a replacement for giving somebody the job that they've worked for.
Yeah.
But that's me off my soapbox now.
Okay.
What I'm trying to say there is your set decorator is invaluable to the success of your film and you as a production designer.
Yeah. So then that leads on to that point there of then, as a production designer, are you signing off on let's say we're shooting in 5 days' time. How many days typically are we talking in terms of the set being able to be ready, and then are you signing it off, and then are you going there on the shooting day, or are you already thinking about 2 weeks ahead of time?
All of the above.
Right. Yeah.
I try to finish it in advance as possible.
Yeah.
Which, given higher times of locations and studios, are not that many days in advance of the filming.
Yeah.
I usually try to be there to hand over a new set to the director on the day and leave very quickly because I'm getting the next day's set together.
Yeah.
I'm very rarely there on shooting day, only to hand over.
Yeah.
If you see me around too long, chances are things aren't going too well, which is not a good thing.
So then, is it the art director then that would be there on a day-to-day basis? Or...
You hire a standby art director, which in different countries is called on-set dresser. Anyways, they're basically what you hire is your eyes and ears on set.
Got it. Yeah.
They know what you like.
Yeah.
What you're supposed to set. What you don't want there. Just to keep kind of visual control of the production designer's vision, as you can't be there.
And then, as the production days finish, are you involved? Is your team involved with breaking the set, bringing it all to pieces, or is that another department that's taking care of that?
No, the team break it down. The set decorators and prop team go in, de-prop it.
Yes.
Construction then either strike it and put it away, maybe to use again later, or strike it and skip it.
Yeah.
If I'm doing a television series, always like to strike and put it away because I might manufacture it into something else later. Yeah. It's reuse, redesign.
Yeah.
Be economical about your use of slattage and scenery.
Very good. Well, then, that's terrific. So, I mean, what I'd then just be keen to cover then is really, I think most recently you've been working on feature film Hurricane Squadron 303.
Yes, we finished shooting that in November of 2017.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think that'll be released at the end of 2018, if I'm correct. I'm not quite sure.
Yes,
but there's an awful lot of post-production work in it.
Yeah.
It's a very exciting story for the times now. It's very topical.
Yeah.
And it's a story that needs to be told now about Polish pilots who fought for the RAF during the Second World War and were very successful.
Yeah.
The reason I did it was the script was just wonderful.
Yeah.
And again, topical.
Yes. Yeah. All right, so I think we just about covered just about everything I was very keen to find out from you. But so maybe just a couple more questions. So first up, is there any particular genre or style of film that you would still like to work in that you've not been able to cover thus far?
Basically, that's an open-ended question because I'd like to do anything.
Yes.
That was thrown at me. Futuristic, past,
yeah,
present. I think every period presents itself with a wonderful challenge.
Yes.
and a new challenge. I'd love to start doing some pre-19th century, 20th century stuff.
Yeah.
I'd love to do science fiction.
Yeah.
I've done fantasy with The Last Dragonslayer and found that really exciting.
Mm-hmm.
When having done 1940s and war right before it, to actually have something where you could run a bit loosely with the rules.
Yeah.
I basically anything,
Yes.
any script.
Yeah. And
I think there's some wonderful stuff to do with recent period.
Yeah.
I mean, I love it now when they say 1980s is a period film.
Yeah, I know. Oh God. Yeah, I know.
That's a bit scary.
Yeah. And I presume that a contemporary piece presents just as many challenges from a production design perspective as a historic or a futuristic.
Oh, even more so.
Uh-huh.
Because people's perception of contemporary, I should say everybody's perception of contemporary is different.
Yeah.
Because again, it goes back to what I said right at the beginning. Your angle of looking at something is completely different from mine, which is completely different from somebody else's.
Yes. Yeah.
So it's finding that center when you're doing something contemporary.
Yes.
It's slightly, I don't want to use the word easier, but it is slightly easier when you're doing period because it has a set of rules.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
That certain things didn't exist in that time.
Yes.
Therefore,
okay. Mobile phones. Right?
mobile phones, and other types of
Yeah.
things, and specifics of plugs and
Yes.
small little details.
Yeah.
So period films do have its specific rules.
Yeah, that's
Cars
interesting.
that weren't around then.
Yeah.
Whereas everybody has a different perception of contemporary.
Yeah, right. Fascinating. So then finally, do you have any advice perhaps to anyone who would want to get into production design?
Don't do it.
Okay.
And if you're going to listen to me, you weren't even meant to go into production design.
Okay.
That'd be my advice.
Okay.
Quit while you're ahead. Don't start it. Don't do it. And if you're going to listen to that advice, you probably weren't meant to do it.
Yeah.
It's an interesting life. A lot of people say to me when I tell them that I'm a production designer and then explain what that entails, wow, that's really exciting. That's very glamorous. The word that's thrown out a lot. Exciting. Yes, it is. It is very exciting. I love what I do. Mm-hmm. But there's a lot of other things that you have to do to get to do the bit that you find exciting.
Yes.
And isn't always exciting. It isn't always glamorous. It's very fulfilling at times. It's very fulfilling a lot of the time.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of things that go into making films that aren't well documented, that aren't well talked about.
Yeah.
Even in this land of DVD extras, and I'm dating myself there.
Yeah.
Those are edited as well.
Yes.
There's a lot of things that aren't documented in
Yeah.
those DVD extras that aren't exactly what I'd call glamorous or exciting. But it's a very fulfilling way to spend your time, and I'm very grateful that I can somehow scrape together making a living doing something that I love so much.
Yeah.
And believe me, I thank God every single day when I have a good job and a good script and a good director and a good DOP.
Yeah.
Well, we'll just leave it at
long.
that.
Yeah.
What I'm trying to say there, it's great when you have a good collaboration. That's really exciting.
Yeah.
And then to see your end product be good as well. It's just a bonus.
Yeah. Fantastic. Well, it's been terrific to have you on the podcast today, so thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
I've been Steve Collison here with Michael Fleischer on the FilmSetGeek.com podcast. Thanks for listening, and goodbye.